Now that you have an understanding of DISC assessment, let's talk about some of the applications. First of all, we use it a lot in training. We also use it in consulting. We also use it in selection, and we also use it in coaching. How we use it in each of these areas is slightly different, but let me give you some ideas on how to incorporate this into your particular business model. I was actually teaching a leadership course at Winnebago Industries in Fort City, Iowa, back in 1979. I introduced DISC into that leadership course at that time, and it totally changed the course itself. It changed the amount of time. I had a 30-hour leadership course that once I introduced the use of DISC into the course, I later reduced it to an 8-hour course or an 8-hour one-day program. The reason I was able to do that is that actually people were able to see their leadership style. So we really concentrated on leadership style, communication, delegation, and things that were really tied to that. When I introduced the DISC assessment into the course, it changed the course forever. People used the information from that course for 6 months or longer, some for life, some for much longer than over a 3-day weekend. I think we've all been to a seminar and we left with great material. We took it back, we put it on our desk, and we never applied any of it. So one thing about assessments is that they change training forever. This changed that course, it changed the impact of that course, and it really added a lot to it. So the benefits from using assessments in the leadership is that people are actually going to see themselves for who they really are. It's going to help them identify, understand, and appreciate and how to manage those different people that they manage, and it's going to help them build a solid communication program. And because we sort of live in a laboratory, you can test things on people and you can read their reaction to it. So you can try the right strategy, you can try the wrong strategy. The more you understand people, the more you'll understand that if you make a mistake with people, they are great and they will allow you to correct it. But when you have an idea on the correct strategy is when you really bring about an impact. So in training, we can actually change all training, but in leadership training in particular, this really helps people understand how they go about making decisions and how they go about trying to influence people to their way of thinking and how they go about communicating with those people. It will change your leadership training forever. Please insert DISC into your training. Back in 1979, I started doing research on farmers. I lived in Iowa, old ag country. I grew up on a farm, so I understood them quite well. So I went out and I interviewed farmers. I took slides of their farmstead. I had them fill out a survey plus the DISC assessment. Once I had done over 200 farmers, I sorted these into the various styles and started observing the slides over and over and over so that I really learned that I can actually drive by a farmstead and identify the decision maker behind the farmstead based on the appearance of the farmstead. So I was training ag salespeople in the Midwest, and I incorporated not only the assessment, but actually slides that I had from my research. So in my sales training, I actually administered the assessment right before the first break. We scored it, and so they knew whether they were a D, I, S, or C coming back from the break. I talked about some of the common things about DISC in maybe 20 or 30 minutes, and then I actually showed slides of farmers. Now here's the great part of this training, because the hands would come up and they would say, I'm a D, and you showed me a farmstead. That was my farm that you showed me. I grew up on a farm. That was my dad. It identified so they could really relate to what they were seeing, and they had their own personal assessment that allowed them to really relate to this. This immediately changed the sales training and especially the application, because they left there knowing their sales style. They left there knowing how to identify buyers. They left there with ideas on how to make opening statement to buyers before they ever met them, and to make opening bonding type statements that the buyer, the potential buyer, would really relate to. So all of this changed my sales training, and I was able to put on a one-day dynamic sales training program that actually got great results regardless of where it was. Then I left the ag behind me and moved into all types of sales training, but used the same concept and always used the assessment as a part of my training. Again, when I incorporated the assessment, it was more than a 72-hour gig. It actually extended for months and maybe even years where they were still applying the same principles that I taught them in that sales training class. I can't imagine doing team building without using assessments. Every team member needs to understand what it is they bring to the team, as well as other team members. And once we understand what each brings to the team, we truly must understand how we communicate between us and how I want to receive information, how you want to receive information. So the assessments were actually built for helping people understand each other. And of course, in team building, trust is a major issue. And the better you understand each other, the more trust becomes a natural byproduct of that. Customer service, almost the same thing. How do we know how to treat people unless we can identify, understand, and appreciate those people in our lives who are different than we are? So rather than treat every customer the way we want to be treated, our customer service training really allows us to delve into each customer, each individual customer, and customize our approach based on what they really need when they're in our store. In my consulting practice, I quite often got involved in the people problems. One of the first things I would do would be to be a detective, to use assessments to collect data to find out who were the players, what were the players like, what was their style. And then I would look at the situation and be able to put together an actual solution, a permanent solution, rather than just Band-Aid surgery. So as a consultant, using assessments, there's a time to use them, there's probably a time not to use them, but anytime you have people in the equation, you need to collect data, and behavior is a good place to start. Back in 1979, I had people start asking me if I would help them with selection. They said I knew more about people than they did, just because I was using assessments. I got into the assessment business using DISC. I soon found out that I needed more than DISC, and I incorporated motivators and other assessments. But behavior still is a major part of selection because it matches people up to how they do what they do with jobs that require that. And it really ends up reducing the stress. So it really is a major benefit to use behavior as a part of the selection process. In fact, when we say use assessments in selection, we only say use them as about a third of that total decision. But you're collecting the information, and this is a good assessment to be a part of the screening process, because depending on the job itself, you can benchmark that job and determine what is the ideal behavior for that particular job. And then you can screen people out based on behavior as well as the other assessments. So please use behavior as a part of your selection process, but remember, it's only a part of the process. When we first computerized the DISC assessment, we started learning the power of debriefing the reports. Prior to that, everything was somewhat of a paper assessment. It was boilerplate. And when we came out with the internet and the computerized version, we were able to personalize it. And by personalizing it, we had to go over the report with the people personally. We'd read every sentence. We would say, is this true of you? If it's not true, let's underline it. Let us check with a significant other to find out if maybe it is true and it's a blind spot that we just don't see about ourselves. If it is true, many times we highlighted it as being very true. Sometimes we even edited the statement to make it a true statement. But what we discovered is that it was very important for people to actually see themselves in the report. It gave you great buy-in, and the better they saw themselves in that report, the better you were able to give them advice on how to deal with different types of people or different situations. So please get involved in debriefing. Debriefing is one of the best ways to add value to the DISC assessments. A number of years ago, we changed our distribution model from calling people distributors to value-added associates. The reason for that is that we really see you must add value to TTI's assessments. And one of the best ways to add value is incorporated in your training, your consulting, your selecting, your coaching, or debriefing just one-on-one. And you will be amazed at the difference you can make in people by spending quality time with them, going over their report, and talking how it applies to both their personal and their professional life.